As his body sinks into darkness, Ira Takuto reflects that his last thoughts were simply that he had died. He recalled that after a lifetime struggling with illness, dying at 18 was frustrating, but he had accepted it rather calmly to his surprise. As his consciousness and senses were falling into darkness, he thought to himself that this must be death. Suddenly, he questioned what was happening as something touched his finger. He then noticed the smell of grass and that his surroundings were getting brighter. He heard the distinct sound of leaves rustling nearby. Iritakudo was sitting alone on a large, ancient stone structure surrounded by trees. He wondered aloud if this was the place one goes after death, noting that it felt a bit cold. He remarked on how fresh the air was, just as Ode no Adu's voice inquired if he had woken up. Iritakudo looked up in surprise upon hearing the unfamiliar voice. Ode no Adu stood nearby, her back partially turned amid falling leaves. Iritakudo expressed his disbelief, thinking it couldn't be possible but recognizing her dress. He tentatively uttered her name, Adu. Ode no Adu smiled warmly and affirmed, "Yes, my king." The narrative introduces Eternal Nations, a country management simulation game, and identifies Adu as one of its hero units. He recalled playing with several races and nations in the fantasy world of Eternal Nations, trying to dominate it in a turn-based game. This was perfect for him, as one playthrough could take tens of hours, and he spent his days moving from one medication to the next after his parents stopped visiting. He got so into the game that he completely forgot about his loneliness, eventually managing to become the top player and earning the title of a legendary player. He reflected that thanks to the unit Adu existing, he managed to accomplish his only feat before dying. Iritakudo, still seated on the stone steps, looked towards Adu and questioned her presence. Adu let out a soft giggle. She smiled warmly, telling Takudo-sama that it was all right. Adu dramatically announced Ira Takudo as the player officially recognized as a legend, the one who achieved the first-ever Nightmare difficulty clear playing as the hardest nation, the civilization of Minagra. Takudo, startled, asked why she knew about that. Adu smiled knowingly and stated that she remembered everything too. Adu explained that she remembered everything, all that Takudo told her, the times they conquered the world together, and even the times they suffered defeat. With a gentle smile, she reassured Takudo-sama not to worry, as she remembered all about him. Takudo admitted somewhat bashfully that using Adu was his policy and playstyle. He confessed that his body had always been weak, so perhaps he had wanted to become like her. He added that he was really glad he could talk to her like this. He then asked if this was heaven and if she had called him here, to which Adu replied, "No, master." Adu clarified that when she noticed she was already present, and if she had to guess, this wasn't really heaven either. Adu commented that this world felt a lot like the world from Eternal Nations. Takudo, looking around, perceived it as an unknown world. Adu thought to herself that it might sound cliché, but this felt like a miracle. Adu gently suggested to Takudo-sama, "Why don't we start over again together?" leaving him momentarily speechless. Takudo acknowledged that they didn't know where they were. He wondered aloud if this was the game world, his own world, or perhaps a different kind of world altogether. Despite the uncertainty, he considered that they could be like they used to be. Adu enthusiastically suggested that they start again, the two of them, and build their own kingdom. Takudo chuckled at the thought of a kingdom, then seemed to reach a decision. He clenched his fists, wondering what he could do with this body now that he could move freely, and declared his desire to test it. He then called out to Adu. Adu replied with a smile, "Yes, my king." Takudo, smiling confidently, announced their plan to build their own country, a kingdom just for the two of them. Adu cleared her throat in preparation. With a mischievous grin, Adu introduced herself as Adu the Bastard Sludge, child of the world-ruining mud, and invited Takudo to come and sink as low as they could together. A system message announced a new game start, listing player as Ira Takudo, civilization as Minagra, alignment as evil, and difficulty as unknown. Takudo commented that Adu's pronouncement was kind of embarrassing, to which Adu agreed but added she was glad she did it. Takudo then addressed Adu as his one and only subject, asking if she knew what their evil nation of Minagra must do first to lead the world to destruction. He recalled that he was the only one who managed to clear the game with this country, hinting at a unique strategy. Takudo excitedly announced that they were becoming shut-ins. Adu enthusiastically agreed, exclaiming that they should shut themselves in. It is explained that even though Minagra is the evilest nation, in the official setting, its civilization trait is specialized in internal administration and has a handicap in combat, making it a super-specialized country in domestic affairs. The source of this foreboding feeling was identified as the forest in the Dark Continent, known as the Great Cursed Lands. A mysterious robed figure declared this to be an omen of disaster, wondering why it was happening now all of a sudden. Another robed figure approached, informing Your Holiness that it was time. The second figure addressed the first as Cardinal. This figure stated there was a matter they wished to discuss with the Cardinal. Meanwhile, Takuto and Adu reacted with alarm to a sudden high-pitched screeching sound. Takuto and Adu were visibly disturbed by the strange screeching. A grotesque, newly formed long-legged bug scout unit was shown, identified as an emergency production. Takuto commented on how disgusting it was, and Adu agreed, adding that while she had seen their 3D models in-game, the real thing was a bit too much. Adu referred to the creature as Bug-kun, while Takuto cleared his throat before issuing orders. Takuto, regaining his composure, commanded the bug in the name of the glorious Minagra to go check the area around them. He further instructed it to avoid contact with any beings as much as it could. He reiterated that surveying was its main task, and the bug screeched in acknowledgement. The bug then dashed off into the distance to begin its reconnaissance. Adu observed that she was a bit worried, but it looked like the bug was properly following orders like a unit. Takuto confirmed this, adding that he could also share its vision to some extent. Adu then asked Takuto how much mana he still had, noting that things were going smoothly for now. Takuto explained his mana situation. He started with 200 MP, and after producing the long-legged bug in emergency production costing 100 MP, he had 100 MP left. He mentioned an early colony would cost 20 MP, and while he could make anything with enough mana, emergency production was costly, but they needed to know where they were. Takuto stated that while they had some mana left, they couldn't afford to waste any more of it. Adu declared she would do her best as their militia, though she seemed to want to say something more. Takuto considered that Adu as a hero unit gets stronger as time passes, but her current combat power was only 3. If they encountered an enemy, she might get crushed depending on its strength. He mused that this trait of having potential but being hard to level up was one of the reasons Minagra was so hard to play. Adu nervously laughed, agreeing that the difficulty was indeed pretty high and had always been like this. The bug scout continued its rapid exploration through the dense forest. Takuto, processing the scout's vision, commented that he had a grasp on most of the terrain around them, but it was just forest everywhere, leading him to believe this forest was actually really big. Adu added that she didn't see any food icons, and not only that, but they also hadn't encountered any wild animals or monsters yet. Adu noted that forest terrains have a concealment effect, so it was ideal for them, but having no wildlife around was strange. Adu apologized for not being able to be of any help, and Takuto replied that they would have to continue scouting for a while. Takuto kindly told Adu that it was all right, as just her being around was fine. Adu's face lit up with joy, sparkling with happiness. She enthusiastically told Takuto, "My king, I'm extremely happy right now," to which he replied with a surprised "really?" Takuto mused that Adu was supposed to be a hero from an evil country, but she could be surprisingly cute sometimes. He paused, realizing what he was thinking. Takuto wondered if this cheerful demeanor was how Adu's personality used to be. Adu, with a slight pout, asked Takuto-sama if he was listening to what she was saying, and he quickly apologized. A buzzing sound indicated the bug scout was trying to communicate with Takuto. He informed Adu that Bug-kun was contacting him and offered to share its vision. The bug scout observed a settlement with several figures moving about from a hidden vantage point. Adu, looking at the shared vision, questioned if it was a dark elf settlement or something similar. Takuto observed that it was now confirmed they were in a fantasy world, while Adu noted that dark elves are neutral but closer to evil, which she found somewhat reassuring. Takuto worried that the settlement was quite close, and Adu added they should be careful as they could be lawful dark elves too. If it was another country's colony, they would be in trouble. Takuto lamented that bordering another nation this early would be the worst thing possible. Adu suggested that if it came to that, they should run away, calling war a barbaric thing, and Takuto agreed, stating that to run is to win. Takuto declared that therefore first, they would watch those dark elves and get more information on them, preparing for if push came to shove. Adu's eyes widened in sudden shock and alarm. Heavy footsteps approached their location. Both Takuto and Adu looked up, startled by the sudden arrival. A group of dark elves led by Jia confronted Takuto and Adu, who looked surprised by the sudden encounter. The text notes they were found before they could even scout. A group of dark elves seeks refuge and rest within the depths of a forest. The elves, including children, are visibly tired from their travels. A young dark elf is deeply asleep, highlighting their exhaustion. A dark elf warrior observes the dire state of his people, lamenting that they cannot continue traveling this way, especially with the children suffering despite being prioritized for food. Elder Molter calls out to Jia. Captain Gia turns his attention to Elder Molter, who has summoned him. Gia tells Elder Molter that no matter what he says, they still have to proceed. Elder Molter concedes he cannot stop Gia but asks him to listen first. Molter describes the cursed forest, noting its abundant vegetation but also the rumor that something evil is sealed within these uncharted lands. Gia asks about the nature of the evil, while Molter warns about the King of Ruin and the need for caution. Pepe scoffs at it as superstition, but Gia stresses that their people will starve if they don't act, despite the forest's weirdness, as those who can move must search for food. Gia and two companions, including Emle, cautiously approach a structure in the forest, where Ode no Adu and the shadowy Ira Takuto are waiting. Gia reacts with intense fear and shock. One of Gia's companions also recoils in fear. Ode no Adu stands calmly beside the imposing shadow of Ira Takuto. Gia observes that the entity has a human shape, but he cannot see beyond that. He concludes with dread that the shadowy figure is a manifestation of evil. The menacing aura of Ira Takuto's shadow form is palpable. Gia, with Emle looking on worriedly, reflects that his actions could determine the fate of his entire race. He decides he must choose his words carefully as he walks towards Adu and Takuto. Gia also considers that his conduct is equally important in this delicate situation. Gia introduces himself as the captain of the Dark Elf Mazaramu clan to Adu and the shadowy Takuto. Assuming Adu is a noble, Gia apologizes for trespassing in the forest, while Emle watches anxiously. Adu responds, noting that Gia seems to understand the implications of his actions. Ode no Adu questions Gia, asking what reason he had to commit the sin of trespassing. Gia internally notes that his clan, Mazaramu, once lived centrally in the Idaraja continent, and considers Adu's potential danger due to her connection with the shadow. He hopes that careful wording might appease her, considering their former masters, the supreme elven decision-making body. Adu impatiently demands that Gia state his case briefly. Under pressure, Gia exclaims that his people were persecuted, chased from their land, and had nowhere else to go, thus ending up in the forest. Gia internally curses his lack of composure, regretting not explaining their dire circumstances more carefully. He also thinks that the shadowy figure seems to have no interest in them. Suddenly, Ira Takuto's voice emanates from the shadow, remarking on Gia's thin appearance. Gia is shocked by Takuto's words. He wonders aloud what that was and if the shadow figure actually spoke. Another elf expresses disbelief that the entity can talk. Adu lets out an exasperated sigh. Emle quickly interjects, explaining that the persecution they faced was harsh, forcing them to flee to this land. Gia, frustrated with himself, elaborates that they ran out of supplies, came to the forest to evade pursuers but failed to find any food. He adds that some of his people haven't eaten in several days, but Ira Takuto's voice cuts in, stating that this does not answer the question. Ira Takuto considers their plea. Emle looks on with concern. One of Gia's companions questions his decision to beg for mercy. Gia explains to his companions that because they entered this forest, their only recourse is to bow their heads and beg for mercy from Adu and Takuto. Emle and another dark elf cry out in disbelief, asking why they must be punished when all they did was try to survive. A wider view shows the suffering of their people. Gia clenches his fist, internally echoing their sentiment that they just wanted to live in peace. Gia silently wonders if the desire to survive is truly a sin. Gia is startled by something appearing before him. A large, unknown fruit has rolled to a stop right in front of Gia. Ira Takuto, from his shadowy form, offers the fruit, calling it an apple and suggesting it pairs well with rabbit. Emle, another young elf, and Gia react with surprise, sniffing the air and questioning if it's an apple or if he mentioned rabbit. Gia examines the fruit, noting its sweet scent and weight from moisture. He remarks that he has never encountered such a fruit before. Gia is taken aback by this unexpected offering. Elsewhere, Emle and an older elf are already enjoying some fruit, finding it incredibly sweet and fresh. As they relish it, Ira Takuto's shadow offers more, specifically pears, to Gia's group, while Gia, surprised by their immediate consumption, cautions them. However, Ode no Adu interjects, telling Gia to accept the offering as it is a gift from her king. Gia, though still asserting he can move, decides that rather than taking this for himself, the food should go to the others who fled with them. Adu looks on questioningly. He bows low before Adu and the shadowy Ira, explaining that they have children with them who are starving. He explains that his people haven't eaten in days and are weakening. He pleads for this generous offering to be bestowed upon the children. Ira Takuto's shadowy form listens intently to Gia's desperate plea. In the dark elf encampment, a mother cradles her child, singing softly. She notices her child is sleepy and continues to sing. The mother reassures the child, telling them not to be afraid and suggesting they sleep together. Suddenly, Gia's voice cuts through, urging them to hold on and wake up. Gia arrives presenting mashed fruit to the mother and child, telling them to hurry and eat. The surprised mother looks at the food offered for her child. Other elves also begin to receive food. The mother gently coaxes her child, who is barely conscious, to eat the food. The child weakly opens their mouth. The child manages to swallow the mashed fruit. A glimmer of hope returns to the mother's eyes. Deeply moved, she thanks Captain Gia profusely. Soon, the entire group of dark elves is seen sharing the precious food. It is a moment of relief amidst their hardship. Later, as the elves distribute the remaining provisions under the moonlight, Emle gratefully tells Gia that having so many provisions is like a dream come true, remarking this is the last of it. She attributes it all to Gia's efforts. Suddenly, a voice cries out from the darkness, warning Gia that he has been tricked. The voice belongs to Elder Molter, who confronts Gia heatedly, arguing that an evil being like Ira Takuto would never grant alms without expecting compensation. Molter scolds Gia for using words like benevolence for someone they should respect. Gia, distressed, questions what other choice he had. He retorts that they are only able to waste energy arguing because Ira fed them. Gia points out that their people are fed and asleep. He emphasizes it is all thanks to the charity of this supposed evil being. He reiterates his question to Molter, asking what else he could have done in their desperate situation. Molter remains silent, a bead of sweat trickling down his face, seemingly conflicted by Gia's pragmatic reasoning. Meanwhile, Ode no Adu angrily confronts Ira Takuto, demanding he sit up and explain why he used their precious mana so recklessly. Ira, sitting calmly, explains that the more he heard of their plight, the more he pitied them, and a simple because wouldn't suffice as an explanation for his actions. He felt they needed at least that much for their people and was concerned it wouldn't be enough. Iratakudo then looks towards the dark elves with a sympathetic expression, murmuring, "Poor you." Adu is taken aback by his reasoning. She calls out his name in alarm as he acts. He extends his hand and a strange energy emanates from it. This energy flows towards Gia and Imle, who are still processing the earlier events. Suddenly, a massive torrent of food, fruits, vegetables, and bread materializes before them. Adu watches in shock and exasperation. Ira's power and emergency production command utilizes mana as a resource to produce these goods. Gia and Imle can only stare in disbelief, exclaiming that it's a miracle and they can feed everyone. They profusely thank Ira, hailing him as a great one, while Adu remains stunned. Overwhelmed by this miraculous display, Gia, Imle, and the other dark elves bow deeply in gratitude before Ira Takuto and Adu. Ira remarks to Adu that he simply couldn't help himself and that her counterarguments won't work. He also muses that, thinking back, the dark elves seem to act rather strangely. Adu, still flustered, exclaims his name and insists that she hasn't finished talking yet. She vows to make him listen, hinting at the many difficulties that lie ahead for their new subjects and their burgeoning country. Ode no Adu pouted visibly. Iratakudo attempted to console Adu, suggesting she cheer up, but Adu insisted she was not down. Ira reflected on their decision to conserve mana, acknowledging his recent lavish expenditure. He then turned to Adu, stating he needed her assistance with a matter. Adu looked at Ira, touched by his words that he could not do it without her. Ira apologized for his stubborn behavior, while Adu, feeling disgraced for opposing her king, begged for forgiveness. Adu, assuming it was about food production, readily agreed that there would be no problem producing that amount, and inquired what the task was. Ira then admitted that he had trouble speaking properly the day before, much to Adu's surprise. Adu thoughtfully commented that Ira had convincingly portrayed a strong king who dislikes talkativeness when facing the dark elves. She added that even if he claimed he could not speak well, she did not think there had been any problem. Adu was visibly stunned by his revelation, exclaiming, "No way." Ira sheepishly admitted that it appeared he had a communication disorder. As Ira despaired over his social awkwardness, Adu tried to console him, exclaiming that his stoic demeanor was fitting for a king who speaks only to trusted vassals. Adu then asserted that any problem could be overcome with sufficient wealth and military might. The sudden appearance of Subit no Mushi no Ju Isla caught Ira's attention. Adu explained that she had recalled the creature to their base. Ira observed the approaching dark elves, noting their proximity. He presumed they were coming for the remainder of the food, and planned to tell them to leave the forest soon after. Ira worried about his inability to speak well and negotiate, while Adu was surprised he doubted his speaking ability. Adu confidently declared she had a good plan and asked Ira to leave it to her. Molter expressed that it was an honor to be before them and that they were truly thankful for the opportunity. He formally introduced himself as Molter Cordal Mazaramu, the leader of this group of dark elves. Adu, sensing Molter had more to convey, encouraged him to speak his mind. Adu whispered to Ira, urging him to continue role-playing as strong characters, though Ira privately doubted their strength. Molter explained he had come to apologize for the impolite behavior of one of their young ones. He also wished to extend his greatest gratitude for the kind provision of much-needed supplies to their clan. Adu, speaking for Ira, reassured Molter that it was natural for them to show such unsightly behavior before a great being, and that Ira was not narrow-minded enough to be shaken by such a trifling matter. Molter's eye reflected his earnestness. Molter expressed that their entire race felt ashamed of their pettiness before such generous benevolence, and asked for the honor of knowing their name. Ira internally noted that he had not mentioned his name last time, while Adu observed the situation. Adu loudly proclaimed Ira's titles: Ruler of Ruin, King of the Apocalypse, Ira Takuto-sama. She commanded the Dark Elves to remember his great and noble name, and to refer to him as Ira-sama or Ira Takuto-sama. Molter was deeply moved by the revelation. Adu introduced herself as Adu, instructing them to be careful not to call her by the same title as Takuto-sama, adding they didn't need to remember her name. Molter solemnly promised that from that day on, their clan would etch the names Ira Takuto-sama and Adu Dono into the bottom of their souls. Ira felt a bit worried but observed that things seemed to be going well, while Adu declared it excellent. Adu then said, "Well then." Adu told the Dark Elves to take the food and leave, mentioning that some of it would rot soon. Molter looked determined. Ira was surprised by the turn of events. Molter earnestly asked how they could repay them for being saved. Adu then asked if they could provide something that would satisfy her king. Molter admitted their ignorance, stating they couldn't imagine an appropriate offering, while Ira interjected that they didn't need anything. Ira internally questioned if Adu had gotten bored. Ira expressed his wish to end the meeting peacefully, despite Molter's continued insistence. Adu, annoyed, loudly questioned Ira, reminding him she had said they didn't want anything. She then accused Ira of plotting something which she would never do. Molter remained bowed, while Adu looked stern and Ira observed the tense situation. Ira acknowledged to himself that the situation was indeed bad. He decided he could not let Adu continue like this and cleared his throat. Adu responded affirmatively to her king's unspoken instruction. Ira called Adu's name, signaling a change in tactics. Adu leaned in to whisper to Ira. She complained to Takuto-sama that these people were awful at negotiating. Adu fumed that they would just cause harm if left alone and suggested killing them all, while Ira tried to calm her down, remarking that she was not very good at this either. Ira tried to reason with Adu, explaining that he was sure the Dark Elves wanted an agreement where both parties could profit. Ira explained that judging by their previous condition, even if they survived longer, they would just return to a life of having nowhere to sleep, and thus could not simply leave. He added that since they were evil-aligned, the Dark Elves were already suspicious, and her current approach would only make them more uneasy, while Molter wondered about the catch and Adu suggested they go home. Ira suggested they ask for something in return to convince them, an idea Adu found brilliant, as expected of her king. Adu, with a sly smile, addressed the Dark Elves, stating her desire to enjoy the conversation more, despite finding them somewhat foolish. Molter vehemently denied any ill intent, exclaiming they would never see Takuto-sama as an evil spirit, while Ira commented on their foolishness being troublesome. Adu then announced that her king's word was absolute. They were to rejoice, as he had decreed that they shall receive tribute in exchange for this offering, and asked if they were relieved. Ira considered that the exchange should involve something of equivalent value. Adu frantically signaled Ira, pleading for his help. Adu eagerly suggested that Ira ask the Dark Elves about the outside world. Molter respectfully acknowledged the command. Ira hoped this offer would be enough to convince them, and Adu declared they would complete the bargain on these terms. Ira contemplated two primary reasons why he was hesitant to let the Dark Elves stay in the forest. His first concern was that their race belonged to a different group, and if this world functioned like eternal nations, differing civilizations and mindsets could lead to conflict. Such differences often resulted in warfare and strife between groups. The second reason was that Minagra, being an evil nation, would eventually curse the land, making it an unsuitable environment for the neutrally aligned Dark Elves. Ira considered that while he wanted to build a nation using the forest as a base, the Dark Elves' presence would honestly be a nuisance. Molter humbly stated they would be extremely grateful if the king permitted them to reside in the forest. Ira correctly predicted Molter's hopeful request. Adu vehemently objected, insisting that the Dark Elves must leave the forest after completing their agreement. Malter appeared deeply burdened and worried. Ira noted how tired the Dark Elves appeared. Ira reasoned that they probably wouldn't make it far if he abandoned them, and doing so after providing food would leave him with a bad feeling. Malter then addressed Ira, thanking him profusely for permitting them an audience. Adu hesitantly addressed Ira as the Dark Elves rested. Ira recalled his reputation as a legendary player. Malter reassured Gia, telling him it was okay. He acknowledged that he now possessed the king's power. With newfound determination, Ira announced, "All right, let's do this." Ira then made his offer to the Dark Elves, inviting them to become his citizens. Adu looked on in stunned silence. Malter and the other Dark Elves were equally taken aback by the proposal. Adu reacted with disbelief to Ira's offer. She insisted on speaking to Ira, telling the Dark Elves to wait. Adu questioned Ira about his plan, reminding him that the Dark Elves were neutrally aligned. Ira explained that he knew, and that was why he wanted to use the refugee system to recruit them, which would change their alignment to match Minagra's. Adu expressed concern that they might come into conflict with the main races of Minagra once produced. Ira then prompted Adu, asking if she remembered the bug Subit no Mushi no Ju Isla. Adu, looking at the stats for the homunculus race, questioned Ira's ability to tolerate such a creature. Ira admitted that not only was communication impossible, but its appearance was also bad for his mind. Adu noted that it was good Takuto-sama had found something to be interested in. She then affirmed her willingness to proceed based on his interest. Adu informed the Dark Elves that the king was planning to establish a nation. She added that if they became his citizens, their protection would be guaranteed. Malter, after a moment of thought, asked what would become of them if they were to become citizens. Adu explained that while she couldn't promise eternal happiness, to be direct, they would become evil. She then added with a sly smile that being on their side was surprisingly fun. 2 days passed and Ira and Adu ventured into the forest. Adu expressed concern for Ira, urging him to be careful, but he reassured her that he could move well and was okay. Adu voiced her uncertainty, questioning whether the Dark Elves would truly serve them as citizens. Ira replied that they wouldn't know unless they tried, and he believed there was merit in welcoming them. Ira explained that while homunculus reproduce quickly, their lack of intelligence was a drawback. He pointed out that because of this, their intellectual buildings, staffed by individuals like Imle, always lagged behind other nations in research, so overcoming this demerit was crucial. Furthermore, he added that being able to have civilized conversations with them was very important, unlike their current delightful friends. Adu informed Ira that the Dark Elves' camp was just ahead, and suggested she go on ahead, to which Ira agreed. Gia and Lornias appeared apprehensive as Ira drew near. The mere presence of Ira seemed to exert a powerful, unsettling pressure on the Dark Elves. Lornias cautioned the other Dark Elves, including Gia, not to look directly at Ira. He warned that they would end up overwhelmed if they did. Ira and Adu arrived at the entrance to the Dark Elves' encampment, where Malter stood. Ira formally welcomed the assembled group of Dark Elves, who were now present before him, as immigrants to his country, Minagra. Adu then turned to her king, Ira Takuto-sama, and asked if he was ready to proceed. Ira faced the crowd of Dark Elves who had gathered. Ira, exuding a powerful aura, proclaimed his intent for his country to thrive and stated that he was counting on them. A system message confirmed that due to the influx of citizens, a nation was created under a great leader hailing Minagra. Adu formally congratulated the Dark Elves, declaring them citizens of Minagra. She conducted the ceremony in the name of their great king, Ira Takuto-sama, promising them all happiness and peace. Among the new citizens, Lornias asked Gia if the ceremony was over, and Gia confirmed it should be. One of the Dark Elves reacted with a gasp, seemingly overwhelmed by the experience. A wave of hatred surged within one of the Dark Elves, fueled by memories of persecution and being treated as worthless. The Dark Elf's hatred intensified, consuming his thoughts as he declared his hate for them all. He felt an overwhelming hatred for everything in life. Observing this, Ira in his shadowy form asked if the elf was okay. Gia, overcome with emotion, realized what it felt like to be protected and hailed Ira Takuto-sama. The Dark Elves, led by Gia, shouted banzai for Ira Takuto-sama, wishing long life to their great king. Ira and Adu watched their new citizens' fervent display. Some days later, Adu asked Ira if he had read the document. Ira confirmed to Adu that he had indeed read it. Ira dramatically fell onto a mattress the Dark Elves had given him. He exclaimed in dismay that the 2 biggest countries on this continent were hardcore good-aligned. Adu elaborated that one was a human nation worshipping a good god, and the other an elven nation revering nature. She warned that if these nations discovered Minagra, they would greet them with hostility, essentially meaning death. Ira lamented their terrible starting location, noting that while they got information from Molter, he hadn't expected the most hostile nations to Minagra to be such dominant powers. Adu, addressing Ira, continued to fret, pointing out the forest's productivity was zero, leaving them with no food, minerals, or mana, and wondered what they were supposed to do. Ira explained that in the game, even without development, environments could produce a certain amount of food and minerals. This base production was used to advance development, but their current location seemed incapable of yielding anything. Ira acknowledged they were in a critical situation, beyond a mere difficulty level. Just then Molter arrived, greeting King Ira and Adudono, offering to continue explaining more about the world today. Molter noticed Ira and Adu's troubled expressions and asked if something was wrong, but Ira dismissed it. Gia also appeared, announcing to the king that he had come too, bringing one of his subordinates, Emle. Gia introduced Emle as being in charge of their intelligence and very knowledgeable about other countries' information and traditions, believing she could be of use to the king. Adu relayed to Molter that the king was very satisfied with their dedication and hoped for good results today as well. Adu advised Molter that there was no need to be so formal as the king disliked strict formalities, though Molter was about to add a caveat. Molter respectfully agreed that if the king said so, he would refrain from excessive formality. Ira mentioned he used to be an ordinary person and found stiff attitudes uneasy, preferring a more relaxed approach. Molter was about to continue where he left off last time, but Adu interjected saying before that. Adu stated that they wanted to explain their future plans today. She announced that everyone present had become important members of their national administration and would each assume an important post, emphasizing that this was the king's decision and not open for debate. Adu assigned Elder Molter to be concerned with the country's management, noting his ability to use magic meant they were counting on him. Gia was assigned to continue as captain and lead the warriors of Minagra. Molter formally accepted his new responsibilities with an as you command. Gia also firmly accepted his role with a similar declaration. Gia passionately declared he would immediately give the order to his men, proclaiming they would gladly kill even babies for the sake of the king. Emle looked on with concern. Molter stated that it all starts here and they would slay uncountable enemies as the king's vanguard, with Emle still looking uneasy. Gia vowed they would target all the people who had persecuted them. He believed these actions would ensure the King of Ruin would be pleased. Ira found Gia's intense declaration rather scary. Gia looked utterly confused by Ira's reaction. Gia, misinterpreting the situation, hesitantly asked if the king's plan was to bring ruin upon the world indirectly rather than directly. Adu looked on, surprised. Adu quickly corrected Gia, stating that war is barbaric and the king actually likes peace. She instructed him to remember that from now on. Gia, dejected, acknowledged that he understood. He was utterly bewildered, internally questioning why the King of Ruin would be a pacifist. Molter seemed pleased by the king's pacifist stance, while Gia looked on. Adu advised them to get plenty of rest in the meantime, and Ira added that after that they should build some proper houses. Molter expressed gratitude to Adu for her compassionate words, adding that unlike Gia, who only boasts of strength, he could be of service in several areas. Molter chuckled to himself. Gia cursed Molter under his breath. Adu commented to Ira that the Dark Elves appeared to be workaholics, and Ira mused whether he should order them to collect materials or choose where to build. Ira wanted them to rest, but considered that not using their motivation might be counterproductive, wondering what skills Dark Elves typically possessed. He then had an idea. Ira proposed to Adu the idea of terrain improvement without destroying the forest, considering they were elves, and Adu agreed it was a good idea. Molter, with Emle beside him, stated that while they weren't as adept as the Elves of Light, they did prefer utilizing large trees rather than bare ground. Ira, with Adu, thought this sounded like a very good start. Gia was again perplexed, wondering why the King of Ruin didn't want to destroy the forest. Ira told Adu he was looking forward to it, and Adu mentioned the forest would be amazing with the effect of encroachment-oriented. Ira instructed them to do their best and not to forget to reforest. Molter, Gia, and Emle listened to the king's instructions. Gia, however, stated he would like to ask something. He hesitantly asked what kind of act reforest was. Ira and Adu were surprised by Gia's question. Adu asked Gia if he didn't know how to reforest, then turned to Molter for confirmation, also asking Emle if she knew. Both Emle and Molter shook their heads, indicating their ignorance. Adu, slightly exasperated, reminded them that in their previous meeting they discussed fortress construction and iron equipment, then asked if they had ever heard of military magic, or the 6 elements. Imle explained that they use magicians in a support role for warriors, but had never heard of military magic. Molter added that they knew about the 4 elements as the basic concept of their magic. Ira, listening, realized that the Dark Elves' technological level, which he assumed included things like smelting, fishing, and fortress construction, was much lower than he had anticipated, finding the situation weird. The Dark Elves noted that the king was being quite talkative. Molter confirmed that basically, their level of magical technology was much lower than what the king expected. Adu acknowledged that they thought Ira would possess some kind of terrain improvement technology, but its level was much lower than expected and confirmed this was exactly the case. However, she pointed out that they didn't know the reason why, but now they knew that the world's level of magical technology was very low. If they sped up their development, they would gain a huge advantage. Molter commented that they had gotten off track. Adu then clarified that reforest means planting trees in an area previously deforested in order to preserve the vegetation, which not only secures resources but also has several other benefits. Molter mused that if it was just planting trees, it didn't sound like much magical technology was needed, but questioned how they would handle trees that take centuries to grow. Adu confirmed his understanding and explained that the reforest she spoke of is a technology that uses magical elements to accelerate growth. She then fervently declared that this was all thanks to their great god, the king of Minagra, and that Ira Takuto-sama created this knowledge, proclaiming it as the truth of the world. Ira was shocked by Adu's grand pronouncements, exclaiming, what? Adu continued, telling the Dark Elves that they had experienced the king's mercy and received the honor of becoming his citizens, and in that process they must have realized how great the king is, while Ira tried to interject. She then boldly stated that the king is actually 100 times more amazing than that, urging them to just try asking anything, as Ira internally noted Adu was on a rampage. Ira internally exclaimed that Adu was just making things up as she began her explanation. Adu recounted a past plague in the Holy Kingdom of Qualia that caused massive deaths, which Qualian priests attributed to a demon curse, as Imle listened. She theorized it was actually a massive rat epidemic. Someone died of plague, rats ate the body becoming hosts, and with no predators their numbers rose, increasing human contact. Adu further elaborated that the real cause was not the rats themselves, but tiny, invisible creatures, germs like typhus, spirocheta, salmonella, and viruses, that they carry which make people die, a concept Imle seemed to be grasping. Gia noted that praying is effective but not possible to cast on such a large number of people, while Imle added that there are several methods to deal with it, but bloodletting weakens the body, so it ends up having the opposite effect. Adu, with a triumphant expression, declared that so the king had spoken, to which Ira retorted that he hadn't said anything. Ira clutched his stomach, complaining that it hurt, while the Dark Elves looked on reverently. Undeterred, Adu proclaimed to the awestruck Dark Elves that in the land of the gods where the king used to live, there is so much knowledge that they don't know about, and that is why he shall bestow many blessings upon them. Imle then asked if the apple that the king gave them, along with other foodstuffs, was also a type of food that he created in the land of the gods. Adu playfully told Ira he was forbidden from eating grapes for a while, confirming it was right, while Ira noted he really liked grapes. Imle excitedly shared that the purple lumpy fruit, referring to grapes, had some seeds in it, so she planted them and they were already budding. She expressed her eagerness to see them grow as Ira looked on. Ira was taken aback by Imle's revelation. Molter and Gia immediately scolded Imle, with Molter saying it was bad and Gia questioning why she did it without asking the king first, and Molter adding if she did it without permission. Ira, holding some of the fruit, wondered why he hadn't thought of planting a fruit from the land of the gods himself, realizing it was an act of emergency production. He understood that the things that emergency production created were all from the other worlds present. Ira considered that in-game, the ability emergency production does not produce strategic resources, but wondered if this only applied to strategic resources that already existed in the game. He held a cup thinking that if that was the case. His eyes widened with realization. A coin-like object materialized in his hand. He would, of course, first need industry, technology, and population to mass-produce it. Ira realized with a grin that even then, if he managed to gather enough mana, he could create the resources that had changed the shape of warfare in the other world. He laughed, realizing he had just proven he could create it, even oil, a substance that had become a trigger for so much killing all over the world. Ira cackled, recognizing how much of a cheat it was to introduce a concept like reforest to a world that didn't even know about it. Adu, seeing his reaction, worriedly asked if she shouldn't have done it, while Imle looked on anxiously. However, Ira, smiling, reassured Adu that it was actually a fine job she did, admitting it was a blind spot for him and felt a sense of triumph, exclaiming he had won. The continent of Idurasia is divided into the southern Dark Continent and the northern Lawful Continent, with the latter controlled by the Holy Kingdom of Qualia and the Elementals Alliance of Elnar, who are building diplomatic relations. A key element of power on this continent is the ultimate weapon referred to as a saint. The Holy Kingdom of Qualia is located in the polar belt at the extreme north. An unseen enemy launches devastating attacks. The survivors report to Saint Solina that all adjacent villages have been annihilated. They earnestly beg her for assistance. Saint Solina of Splendid Burials, one of the continent's 7 great saints, deems the act of inflicting such terror an unforgivable sin. The people appeal to their saint, speaking of the innocent's anguish and their god's voice. Saint Solina condemns the wickedness of defying the holy god Arlos and the sin of corrupting Qualia's order. With a powerful declaration, Saint Solina unleashes her divine retribution upon the enemy. Saint Solina questions the cardinal about their discussion from the previous day. The conversation was about investigating an omen of disaster from the great cursed lands. Solina declares her intention to go personally if dispatching troops is too difficult, shocking the cardinal. The cardinal reminds her that mobilizing holy knights requires following official procedures, not acting impulsively. He further criticizes her for not understanding her position as a saint. The cardinal questions what Solina expects to achieve, reminding her she is no longer a mere laywoman. Solina maintains a calm demeanor despite the cardinal's frustration. The cardinal is clearly irritated by her stance. Solina states her intention to personally seek someone who can mobilize troops. The cardinal dismissively calls her a peasant girl as she leaves. Solina remains steadfast in her resolve to save those in need. The scene shifts to the Minagra territory in the Great Cursed Lands. Adu joyfully announces to the cheering citizens that it is time for building. She reminds them that King Takuto's nation has only just begun. Their new nation must be fortified and expanded to rule over all things and land. Adu declares she is counting on everyone to help with the first step. Several weeks after the Dark Elves became citizens, Gia notes that their societal development is progressing smoothly and successfully. Ira is pleased to finally be out of hospital gowns. He proudly proclaims the stone pedestal as his new throne. This council room and throne mark a new stage for Minagra. Mana is collected monthly from the nation's subjects, with the amount proportional to their degree of happiness. Ira realizes that the happier his people are, the more his country will develop. He is determined to guide his people to ultimate happiness with his own hands. Observing him, Imle notes the king's great satisfaction, while Adu considers it a great honor. The first topic of discussion is the plan for building facilities. Adu explains their first priority is to create facilities for food production, as an empty stomach cannot fight. Molter acknowledges the importance of food, but wonders if the king cannot simply produce infinite amounts. Adu affirms the king's ability but explains that as the territory expands, distribution issues can occur, so providing citizens with harvesting facilities is crucial. Molter concedes that Adu is absolutely right. Ira suggests they attempt to plant and grow a particular tree. Following the tree planting, Molter states they will need to build a management post, a collection hub, and other related facilities. Molter, bewildered by the appearance of the seedling, asks what it is. Adu excitedly declares it to be a flesh tree. Imle finds the sample tasty. Imle requests a further explanation about the flesh tree from Adu. Adu explains it is a food production facility bearing fruit that tastes like human meat. Molter understands but voices concern that some citizens might object to eating human meat, despite their evil alignment. Ira acknowledges individual preferences, while Adu dismisses concerns, calling it an experiment as the flesh tree construction commences. The second topic is the plan for research. Adu explains that research develops technologies that significantly boost a country's power, crucial for their small nation. Molter acknowledges this but citing their limited manpower, asks Adu which technology they should prioritize. Adu, with Ira visibly excited, declares their research will focus on magic, which also piques Molter's interest in new magical knowledge. Adu illustrates that standard magic has limited targets, even with a significant force. She then introduces military magic, capable of affecting large areas and deterring substantial enemy forces. Molter is amazed by this concept, as developing such powerful magic seems like a miracle to him, given his own limitations. The research for military magic is initiated. The third topic is the plan for military affairs. Ira announces his decision to create a hero. The group, consisting of Ira, Adu, Gia, and Molter, inspects the area. Gia asks Adu for clarification on what a hero entails, while Adu muses that it's a strategy with low cost and minimal risks. Adu describes heroes as exceptionally powerful subjects who grow stronger over time, essentially unique monsters. Gia and Molter react to this information, as Adu mentions that while there are restrictions, they can already summon one hero. Ira explains his decision to delay creating a hero, citing the need for stealth and the high resource cost and conspicuousness of an army. Adu highlights the dangers faced by the Dark Elves, such as bounty hunters and the risk of being sold into slavery, problems a hero could resolve. Molter respectfully questions the true extent of a hero's strength. Adu decides a demonstration will be more effective than further explanation. Adu transforms, her powers surging around her. Gia is visibly shocked and overwhelmed by the immense pressure emanating from Adu. As her transformation continues, Adu casually remarks, "By the way." Adu declares that she is also a hero, showcasing her transformed state. Gia and Molter are stunned into silence by Adu's power. Adu effortlessly leaps, demonstrating her enhanced abilities. She explains that this display is a mere fraction of her full power, and clarifies that a hero's strength can rival an entire troop. Molter and Gia express their awe at Adu's incredible strength and reaffirm their understanding of Ira Takuto's power, while Adu boasts she will handle all enemies. Ira appears, addressing Adu. Adu eagerly turns to her king, responding affirmatively. Ira questions the necessity of the tree destruction and instructs Adu to clean up. Ira observes Adu, Molter, and Gia's interaction. Adu looks dejected as she attempts to move the massive tree trunk, while Molter and Gia offer their assistance. Ira recalls entrusting the Dark Elves with advancing their plans. Molter diligently works on the plans. A month passes, showing the Dark Elves at work. Ira exclaims in amazement at the progress, with Adu noting that seeing it firsthand is impactful, and Imle expressing her gratitude. Ira and Adu overlook the burgeoning settlement, impressed by the development. Imle thanks Ira for allowing her to join the inspection, and Ira requests a report on their operational progress. Imle indicates that homes are currently under construction, but progress is slower as efforts are focused on the flesh trees. She points out the location of the flesh trees, noting that the joint facility for cultivation and food storage is advancing well. Imle explains that land cleared by lumber operations is being used as a collection hub and for farms, also reserved for future large-scale construction. Imle reports the discovery of a spring for water and future plans for wells. She adds that their current building functions as a public office for bureaucratic tasks, which she deems adequate for their present needs. Ira mentally commends Imle's initiative, agreeing that prioritizing functional facilities and keeping construction minimal for now is the right approach. Ira notes that his key focus areas for national prosperity, internal development, research, and military planning, are progressing well. He considers his most important achievement so far is seeing the formerly downtrodden Dark Elves now working with such vitality. A Dark Elf expresses their collective gratitude and commitment to serve the king. Imle is overcome with emotion, tears welling in her eyes. Ira expresses his sincere appreciation, stating he is glad to have them as citizens. Imle is overcome with emotion and breaks down crying. Ira and Adu attempt to console the sobbing Imle. Imle points out the continued lack of manpower for daily necessities in the palace, suggesting they may still need the king's intervention. Ira reassures her he will handle daily items and cautions against rushing production to maintain quality. Adu muses that their swift progress is due to Ira's emergency production tools from the land of the gods, essentially a cheat. Ira questions the immediate necessity of constructing a palace. Molter and Imle are shocked by Ira's idea, with Imle finding it outrageous. Imle objects strongly to the idea of sharing a roof with the king, calling it sacrilege, while Ira suggests communal living. Adu discusses the pros of building a royal palace early, such as resource generation and increased happiness, despite the high cost which piques Ira's interest. Ira expresses his desire for a floating castle, a romantic notion that intrigues Adu, Molter, and Imle. Molter is awed by the idea of a floating castle, deeming it beyond imagination but true if the king says so, acknowledging their own minds are minuscule in comparison. Imle is deeply impressed by the king's wisdom, while Ira reminds them that current priorities are housing and food production. The citizens, led by Molter and Imle, rededicate themselves to serving their majesty with body and soul. A structure glows as the citizens hail Ira Takuto-sama, their loyalty seemingly at its zenith. In the Holy Kingdom of Qualia, the esteemed religious position of Holy Knight is held by those versed in both pen and sword, mighty fighters who work miracles and earn the deep trust of the populace. These holy knights are deployed throughout the nation as required by the state. An expedition was recently sent to investigate the perils of the Great Cursed Lands, prompted by the visions of Saint Solina. Recognizing the gravity of the situation, 2 holy knights and a mercenary troop were assigned to this mission. Lornias, a low-ranking holy knight, earnestly prays to holy god Arlos for divine protection during their arduous journey. Wordle, a high-ranking holy knight, impatiently interrupts Lornias' prayers, asking how long he plans to continue and telling him it is time to leave. The expedition, comprised of knights and mercenaries, makes its way through the wilderness. Wordle complains about being bored, remarking he would prefer listening to a dull sermon by a fancy priest. Lornias silently considers that their current deployment must be connected to the recent disturbances in the northern provinces, as such a large troop wouldn't be sent for a mere inspection otherwise. Lornias informs Wordle that their emergency troops were insufficient, necessitating Wordle's involvement and the hiring of mercenaries as they couldn't dispatch forces from the national territory. Wordle dismissively comments that this reliance on mercenaries clearly indicates Qualia's current lack of resources and flexibility. With a patronizing pat, Wordle mockingly commends Lornias for managing to hire 50 mercenaries for the mission. Lornias privately condemns Wordle's crude conduct, thinking it inappropriate for a holy knight expected to be a warrior and a pious man. The mission's political intricacies weigh on Lornias. Saint Solina oversees the north, but the Cursed Lands are in the south, making the Southern Province Congress responsible for troop deployment. Their current lack of forces led them to request Wordle. Lornias grimly accepts that if this reconnaissance mission is successful, Wordle will receive all the credit, while failure means Lornias, with no powerful backing, will bear all the blame. Lornias concedes that despite everything, having Wordle, a high-ranking holy knight, on the mission does increase their chances of survival. He briefly contemplates whether this challenging assignment could also be considered a form of God's providence, perhaps recalling a past memory of family. A mercenary leader observes that the road ahead looks quite rough, alluding to the disturbances in the northern provinces. The mercenary leader, possibly Barget, tells Lornias that this is dangerous work, especially for their kind, but notes the substantial bounty offered for their targets. The mercenary leader philosophizes that the threat of death is a great motivator, and mentions hearing that their quarry is approaching from the north, to which Wordle concurs, stating mercenaries are meant to be ordered around. Wordle casually refers to their adversaries as them witches. Lornias is visibly taken aback by Wordle's terminology. The word witches echoes in Lornias' mind, causing him evident surprise. An elf girl excitedly informs Adu that the cultivation of the flesh trees has been successfully completed according to plan. Adu and Imle gaze up at a fully grown, imposing flesh tree, now capable of sustaining the entire imperial capital of Minagra with a constant food supply. An elven worker further reports that beyond food production, the overall management of their facilities is also running efficiently. Imle notes this as a significantly positive outcome, achieved only a few months since their previous inspection. Adu proposes that after the current housing construction is finished, they can begin building the palace, but Imle appears to have some reservations. Young elves are seen enjoying themselves in a pool of water near what appears to be a rapidly growing, almost sentient structure. Looking around the transformed landscape, Imle voices her concern, questioning the strange and somewhat unsettling nature of the forest. Adu clarifies that the forest's transformation into cursed soil is evidence of the land aligning with Minagra, a consequence of its citizens not being inherently evil. She further explains that this special soil provides benefits to evil-aligned individuals while weakening those of neutral or good alignment, as the land itself reflects the king's influence. Imle remains skeptical, stating she feels no beneficial effects or positive impression from the soil. Adu calmly advises Imle to try taking a deep breath of the air in their territory. Imle follows Adu's instruction, inhaling deeply and then exhaling. A look of surprise crosses Imle's face as she experiences the effect of the air. Imle is astonished by the refreshing sensation, realizing she can now consume flesh fruits without issue and that she is undergoing a transformation unconsciously. Adu acknowledges Imle's change, but soberly adds that a significant problem still remains. They both observe their surroundings, with Adu remarking that their current settlement is in a rather noticeable and exposed location. Wordle loudly laments that this is their final opportunity to drink, finding it unbelievable. He encourages his companions, acknowledging this is the last city they can visit, to enjoy the warm food to their heart's content as they will be there for a while. Lornias reviews a document, noting the diminishing population as they approach the Dark Continent, a place where their survival is not guaranteed, while Wordle comments on their expected inability to secure enough provisions. Lornias internally lists the numerous threats: hostile savages, unknown diseases, and the poisoned earth, emphasizing the need for extreme caution. Meanwhile, a mercenary questions Wordle if it is appropriate for holy knights to consume alcohol. Wordle dismisses the concern, stating that their lord understands the suffering of his people and permits them to seek relief once their duties are fulfilled. Lornias clarifies that the scripture allows for temporary relief from priesthood in the presence of family, not the consumption of alcohol. Wordle casually dismisses this, suggesting a difference in interpretation and calling for another drink, proposing a holy debate on the matter. Changing the subject, Lornias seriously inquires about the Saintess's prophecy and the true situation in the Great Cursed Land. Wordle's expression becomes more somber as Lornias presses for information. A mercenary named Barget approaches Wordle, affirming that trust is paramount for mercenaries and that they understand some information could not be disclosed. Wordle, with a grave expression, then reveals that their current concerns are related to the witch. Lornias questions Wordle about the meaning of witch, recalling it was mentioned when they were dispatched. He also remembers that the mayhem in the northern region was attributed to a witch. Barget elaborates that they initially believed witch was a term heretics used for a magical creature, but now he is uncertain, adding he has lost contact with an investigator sent to the area. Lornias considers the implications of a being that eludes even mercenary intelligence, before shifting his focus to their immediate worries. Lornias contemplates the unsettling possibility that a threat comparable to the northern regions' mayhem might be present in the Great Cursed Lands. Barget asks Wordle if they should anticipate encountering a witch, but Wordle reassures him, stating their objective this time is clear. Wordle explains that the Dark Elves are fleeing to the Great Cursed Lands, and he intends to investigate if they pose a potential problem. Lornias expresses surprise at the mention of Dark Elves, while Barget confirms they were exiled from Elnar and have fled to the Great Cursed Lands. Barget further explains that their specialties are assassinations and curses, with rumors of heresy and a potential witch rising among them, noting the named ones are still on the run. Wordle then specifically names the cursed Sage Molter and Gia the Assassin, remarking that he once fought Molter and found him to be a formidable opponent. Wordle instructs Lornias that their current orders are strictly for inspection. If the Dark Elves appear, Lornias should not cause a scene, and if the situation deteriorates, he must retreat immediately. Barget warns that if the Dark Elves unite their powers, their combined strength could threaten both Qualia and Elnar. Lornias questions the suffering innocents would endure if they fled from the threat. He passionately objects, asserting that as holy knights it is their duty to confront evil. After a thoughtful pause where Wordle calls Lornias' name, he continues his point. Wordle acknowledges Lornias' conviction, agreeing that as faithful servants of their lord, there are times they must stand against evil and even lay down their lives. He gestures towards the mercenaries, emphasizing that for himself, for Lornias, and for all of them there must be a reason to live. Wordle advises Lornias to learn to see the bigger picture, cautioning that youthful impatience to prove oneself can lead to grave errors if one only focuses on the immediate outcome. Lornias concedes the truth in Wordle's words. The moment is lightened when Barget and Wordle tease Lornias about having a woman, with Wordle admitting he has one too. Lornias, however, turns inward, offering a prayer for the blessings of their god Arlos to be with them. Both Lornias and Wordle are visibly shocked and immediately on alert at the unexpected and formidable threat. Suddenly, a massive, roaring hill giant, identified as one of the Dark Continent's native savages, erupts from the ground. Lornias exclaims his disbelief, stating that while he knew hostile beings roamed these lands, he hadn't anticipated encountering such a formidable savage so soon. The hill giant roars in defiance after being struck by arrows. Despite being struck by several arrows, the hill giant charges ferociously towards one of the soldiers. Barget desperately calls out to Sir Lornias for assistance, admitting the mercenaries alone cannot handle the ogre-class savage, to which Lornias confidently declares he can manage it. Wordle orders the archers to stand down and tells the mercenaries they may use their bows as a diversion. However, Wordle interjects, announcing he will take on the giant, much to Lornias' surprise. Lornias expresses concern for Wordle. Wordle notes the tactical disadvantage if the enemy targets their archers. Wordle, silhouetted, raises his sword and calls upon God for the strength to eliminate evil. The hill giant confronts Wordle. Wordle executes a powerful sword technique, creating glowing trails. A soldier identifies Wordle's attack as a fabled holy sword technique. Lornias elaborates that Wordle's technique strengthens his body with divine power through prayers. Lornias explains that the technique also has a special effect on evil beings, as Wordle strikes the giant. The giant reacts in pain to Wordle's attack. Wordle continues his aerial assault on the giant. The giant shows a determined, angry expression. Wordle continues his swift attacks against the giant. Wordle taunts the giant, claiming its large body is no match for him. The giant reels from multiple strikes. Wordle delivers a powerful finishing blow to the giant. The giant screams in pain as blood spurts from its wound. The defeated giant falls to the ground. Wordle advises that they must move immediately to avoid attracting more demon beasts with the smell of blood. A soldier and Lornias look on, the soldier visibly impressed. The soldiers praise Wordle's awesome strength, believing the incident can now be quickly resolved. Iratakudo looks on with a focused expression, his hand glowing with power. A large, dark insected creature emerges from the ground, summoned by Takudo holding remains in its mouth. Ode no Ado thanks Takudo, who is glad his summoning worked. Takudo explains the production process, noting that it requires resources like human flesh and magic, similar to the game. Ado questions what was produced, identifying it as a long-living insect, and tells it to get to work. Takudo announces his plan to produce Isla, Queen of All Bugs, a powerful hero unit. Takudo explains that group units like cavalry require high population and are different from the individual units they can currently create. Ado observes that individual units like the insect can be upgraded, calling it the right decision. Takudo mentions that hero units other than Isla often have very bad personalities, which Ado confirms. Takudo expresses his intention to send scouts once things are more settled, prioritizing the creation of a safe place. He adds that he is busy with initial construction and that the future policy of their country will be created by listening to the people. Takudo tells Ado his desire to live peacefully with everyone in their country. Ado calls out to Takudo with concern. Takudo's eyes widen in sudden alarm. An ominous message declares that a group of armed forces is heading towards the forest. The summoned insectoid creature is present as armed forces approach. Ado wonders about the approaching soldiers, while Takudo states they just want to live quietly. Wordle and Lornias are among the armed group, observing the situation. A shadowed Takudo questions why they are being bothered, as text indicates an enemy approach. One of them, using special goggles, confirms its visibility. They identify it as the Cursed Forest, a great cursed land where no life is said to exist. Ronias suggests to Lornias that a direct path to the northern part is feasible and queries about scouting the perimeter first. The knights discuss their approach to the Great Cursed Land, a vast forest they lack the resources to fully investigate, aiming for a simple investigation for anything unusual. Lornias agrees it is a simple mission without detours and they decide to proceed. As they prepare to proceed, Wordle abruptly halts them. Lornias, surprised, questions Wordle's sudden intervention. Wordle, with a determined look, gestures sharply towards the depths of the forest, drawing Lornias' attention to something unseen. From the shadows of the trees, a mysterious cloaked figure emerges, seemingly floating. Wordle and Lornias watch its approach, with Lornias wondering aloud if it is a girl. Wordle asks Ronias for his assessment of the figure. Lornias speculates she might be a dark elf, as Wordle anticipated, or perhaps a lucky survivor, finding it surprising a girl could travel such harsh land. Wordle seems skeptical of the survivor theory. He calls out to the girl, demanding to know who she is and why she has come from the Great Cursed Land. The cloaked figure Ode no Ado acknowledges them as holy knights of Qualia. She explains that she is a dark elf who fled to this forest and asks about their business. Wordle curtly refuses to explain their presence, insisting Ado answer his questions first. Ado reveals that her people were driven from their home and have nowhere else to go. Ado explains that the cursed, lifeless land is the only sanctuary for her people. Wordle, however, states that as holy knights of Qualia, they have business in the forest and asks for permission to enter. Ado firmly denies their request. Ado continues to plead for them not to enter the forest. Lornias, incensed, reminds her that their actions are divinely ordained and questions her authority to refuse them. Wordle sharply tells Lornias to be quiet while he is speaking. Lornias offers an apology. Internally, Lornias acknowledges his fault in interrupting, but questions the harshness of Wordle's reprimand. He resolves to report Wordle's unholy conduct later. Ado pleads with the knights not to proceed, explaining she has easily frightened colleagues, while Wordle responds that they too wish to return home but are bound by their superior's orders. He presses Ado, asking what secrets the forest holds that compel her to refuse them so strongly. Ado maintains it is merely a quiet, peaceful place. Wordle questions her fixation on such an insignificant forest. Wordle reveals they have received a prophecy foretelling a disaster originating from this location, thus they cannot leave empty-handed. Lornias is aghast at Wordle's revelation. He questions Wordle for divulging such a secret about their mission to Adu, whom he refers to as a dark elf, but Wordle dismisses his concern, stating that sometimes secrets must be revealed. Lornias internally seethes at Wordle's indiscretion, deeming the disclosure of state secrets a punishable betrayal of faith, especially with suspicions of an evil cult. Adu acknowledges the mention of the prophecy. She reiterates that though the Holy Knight is worried about disaster, no one in her land intends any harm. Adu explains that her people have endured a difficult journey to find this place of peace, and suggests the knights should fear a true disaster, not them. Wordle observes that while Adu is young and eloquent, she is also rude in her negotiations. Adu once again assures them that her people do not wish to cause harm. Lornias, agitated, declares that Adu is not a dark elf and senses an evil aura from her. Wordle challenges Adu, asking if her claims are something she would swear in God's name. Adu solemnly swears to her god. Wordle declared they were returning, much to Lornias' shock, explaining he believed Adu's desire for peace was genuine. Lornias vehemently disagreed, pointing to Adu's terrifying aura and insisting she was clearly evil. Wordle further clarified that their investigation would simply conclude that there was no problem whatsoever. Lornias angrily questioned if Wordle would take responsibility if Adu brought disaster, while Wordle advised him not to let emotions cloud his mind. Lornias then mentioned a rumor about Wordle's inappropriate conduct with innocent girls. He insinuated that Wordle was surely not being seduced by Adu. Wordle reacted with fury, asking Lornias if he was serious and calling him a fool. Wordle countered that the rumor was baseless, while Lornias remained convinced of Adu's evil beliefs. Wordle declared that due to Lornias abandoning his responsibility, he was removing him from the mission. Lornias angrily retorted, questioning if Wordle understood the right course of action. From a distance, Ode no Adu urged them to cease their quarrel, emphasizing that conflict would yield nothing. Adu pleaded with them not to make a hasty judgment, insisting that everything she had said was true. A close-up of an eye reflected the image of the cloaked Ode no Adu. Lornias shouted at Adu, calling her an evil being and demanding she return with him for interrogation. Wordle yelled for Vargo, one of their men, seemingly trying to stop an escalation. Vargo apologized, explaining that Sir Lornias had hired them, implying his difficult position. Wordle desperately shouted at Lornias to stop his advance. Ode no Adu sternly told Lornias not to involve innocent bystanders in their conflict. Sighing, Adu lamented that the attempt at peaceful resolution had failed. A dark, ominous force erupted, signifying a drastic change in the situation. Lornias, dazed but alive, was being supported by Wordle. Wordle ordered a mercenary to flee and report back to their country about the unfolding disaster. Lornias apologized, realizing that Adu had already dealt with their messenger. He looked on in confusion, wondering what was happening. Dark tendrils, controlled by Adu, lifted the bodies of the knights and their horses. A disembodied voice expressed despair, remarking how quickly things had gone wrong. Ode no Adu, now in her true elven form, calmly stated that life isn't something that will always go well. Witnessing the carnage, Wordle angrily shouted, identifying Adu as a witch. Lornias, still dazed, stammered the word witch, questioning if it referred to dark elf cultists. Ode no Adu, with a sinister smile, asked who had spoken, before explaining that witch described a person whose very identity was an embodiment of disaster. Adu, now a menacing silhouette with dark tendrils, declared Wordle a fool for his overzealous justice and his choice to confront such disaster. The ground was littered with the aftermath of Adu's power. Wordle, though injured, encouraged a shaken Lornias not to falter. He resolved that they must proceed with their fight. Wordle and Lornias raised their swords, praying to their lord for the strength to prevail against evil. Wordle ordered every able man to draw their bows. A knight acknowledged they had no choice but to take up arms. At Wordle's command, the knights fired their arrows. Ode no Adu, with a smile, remarked that they truly did not hold back and that she liked such people. She effortlessly parried the incoming arrows with her dark tendrils. Lornias exclaimed in disbelief at Adu's ability to parry numerous arrows, while Wordle admitted he should have revealed information about witches sooner. Wordle elaborated that their saintess's prophecy spoke of monsters who would bring ruin to many countries, and it was confirmed that the northern mayhem was caused by witches, with 2 already identified. He concluded that Ode no Adu was probably the 3rd such witch. Lornias reeled, questioning how mere individuals could cause mayhem unresolved by the country's army and saintess. Wordle, undeterred, called for mercenary support and ordered Lornias to follow him. Meanwhile, Ode no Adu fiercely attacked their forces with her dark tendrils. Ode no Adu taunted Wordle for his slowness. Wordle denied this, asserting it might be the opposite as he launched a powerful counterattack. Solina watched the intense exchange in stunned disbelief. Wordle followed through with a wide, arcing swing of his sword. Wordle and Lornias continued their desperate fight side by side. Ode no Adu easily evaded Wordle's strike. Solina observed the unfolding battle with a thoughtful expression. She coolly identified his technique as a god-blessed divine strike, musing that such self-sacrificial attacks against perceived evil explain the pressure on good civilizations. Her commentary concluded as one of her tendrils swiftly ensnared Wordle's hand. Believing he had an opportunity, Wordle declared he would not miss this chance. He lunged forward, unleashing a powerful sword strike aimed directly at Ode no Adu. Ode no Adu showed a brief reaction to the force of his determined assault. Wordle leaped into the air for an overhead strike, but Ode no Adu used her tendrils to deftly parry. Solina watched these developments with growing alarm. Ode no Adu herself maintained a focused, almost annoyed expression. Simultaneously, her other tendrils lashed out, striking down more of the surrounding knights. Ode no Adu admitted underestimating the holy knights, but then cruelly dangled two captured comrades as shields, questioning if their gentle and kind-hearted nature would allow them to risk harm. Lornias, enraged, called Adu a fiend. Wordle tried to rally, stating they only needed two more for victory. Wordle cautioned Lornias against being provoked, urging him to hold himself together. Adu continued to taunt, asking why Wordle still attacked while his comrades were used as shields, to which Lornias affirmed he was following orders. As Wordle pressed on, Adu questioned if his disregard was because they were mercenaries, and if humans truly valued each other. Horrified by the brutal exchange, Solina clasped her hands, begging them to stop. With a chillingly wide and sadistic grin, Ode no Adu uttered a simple stop, complete with a heart, clearly relishing the torment and moral dilemma she had inflicted upon her adversaries. The brutal, repeated stabbings inflicted upon Wordle were emphasized by the onomatopoeia. Lornias looked back in utter shock, splattered with blood from the assault on his commander. Despite his grievous wounds, Wordle gasped for Lornias to run. A monstrous, shadowy manifestation of Ode no Adu loomed over the fallen Wordle as Lornias cried out his name. Sir Wordle was shown horrifically impaled by multiple dark tendrils, his lifeblood draining away as Lornias screamed his commander's name in raw anguish. Ode no Adu watched with a faint, cruel smile, the words "evil is triumphant" echoing the grim finality of the scene. Lornias, kneeling and shaken, wondered how this could be happening. He insisted they had already cut all of her tentacles. Ode no Adu calmly stated she never said she only possessed 6 tendrils. The name Wordle was uttered in despair, likely by Lornias, as the image of the impaled knight reinforced their dire situation. Soldiers despaired, worrying that if Sir Lornias was defeated, they would be next. Amidst screams of terror, the knights began to flee from Ode no Adu's attack. Lornias urgently commanded everyone to scatter. He implored at least one of them to escape and inform their country of the events that transpired. Ode no Adu sighed, remarking on how bothersome the situation was. However, she acknowledged that it couldn't be helped as her tendrils extended towards the fleeing soldiers. Lornias realized with alarm that she was now going for the mercenaries. He defiantly shouted that he would not let her pass. Solina desperately prayed to her god, asking for the strength to prevail against evil. Ode no Adu met Lornias's blade, their swords clashing with sparks. Lornias stammered in disbelief at her skill. Ode no Adu, with a slight smile, questioned if he thought she couldn't handle him. Ode no Adu mockingly asked if Lornias was referring to the sword she held, explaining she had picked it up from a fallen swordsman. Lornias, shocked, demanded to know how she could use a holy knight's sword. She elaborated that she took everything from him, his skills, technique, and devotion, right when she killed him. Lornias was stunned by her claim that she took them. Iratakudo remarked that it seemed the holy knight Wordle was someone with strength and capability befitting a fierce warrior, like his name suggested. Ode no Adu added that Wordle was truly noble and brave, but his feelings, along with his swordsmanship, flowed to her, and he died due to Lornias' short-sightedness. She then twisted the knife by asking about his family, mentioning his wife Masha and his recently born daughter Mina. Lornias reacted with visible shock to her words. Lornias internally questioned why this witch knew their names, recognizing them as those of his beloved wife and daughter. He recalled with dawning horror a time he had spoken of them to Wordle, and she congratulated him on the memory. The terrible truth struck Lornias: everyone killed by the witch had all of their abilities and memory taken. He understood with despair that the more she killed, the more powerful she grew. Ode no Adu revealed she was aware of Vertil's thoughts during the battle, his concern for what would become of Lornias and his family if he were to be defeated. Lornias recalled Vertil's anxieties about the mercenaries and, above all, the people who waited for him. Lornias cried out that it was impossible, that it couldn't be, as if she knew those thoughts. She confirmed that these were indeed Vertil's feelings during the battle and then belittled Lornias, asking what he, who was so pale in comparison, thought after hearing this. Lornias declared that Vertil's feelings would never cease, and that the mercenaries who managed to run would call upon their holy army. Despite his resolve, Lornias was overwhelmed and fell to the ground. As Lornias lay defeated, a group of ominous, shadowy figures appeared before him on the horizon. Lornias uttered in shock and disbelief, "Dark Elf." Meanwhile, Ira Takuto's subordinates reported that they had dealt with every single one of them, thanking him for his good work. The thought that Sir Vertil, who had warned him so adamantly, was killed, filled Lornias with despair. He realized with horror that the mercenaries entrusted with the information had been obliterated. Ode no Adu launched a final, brutal attack on the downed Lornias, who screamed in agony. Ode no Adu, her power evident, addressed the fallen Lornias. Lornias cried in despair, realizing the totality of his failure. She offered to discuss a different path, a future that might have unfolded. Ode no Adu explained that if Lornias had listened to Vertil, he could have been home with his family, enjoying a peaceful life, a tranquility she also desired. But his chosen future was different. His men were dead, critical information was lost, and his own demise was imminent. A chilling smile played on Ode no Adu's lips as she recalled her teachings. She confessed that because she was underestimated, she learned to target what her enemies held most dear. As repayment for his actions, she declared her intention to slaughter everyone connected to him, knowing even the names of villages where he stayed. Whether tens, hundreds, or thousands, she would kill them all, ensuring those who shared his wife and daughter's names would suffer before dying, telling him to rejoice in this fate. Ode no Adu stated that this was the path Lornias had chosen, and though she pitied them and wished not to do it, she would kill them for the person she worshipped. With a final dark pronouncement, she bid Holy Knight Lornias farewell. Ode no Adu cruelly invited Lornias to witness firsthand the death of the person he cherished. Lornias's lifeless body was displayed, a testament to Ode no Adu's victory. Observing from nearby, Ira Takuto commented that Adu's words were truly magnificent. An elf approached, suggesting they deal with the bodies, offering to gather them all. Gia, visibly concerned, asked Ode no Adu if she truly meant her earlier terrifying threats, to which Adu seemed dismissive. Ode no Adu laughed, declaring herself a true pacifist and asserting she would never do such terrifying things concerning his wife and child. Her subordinates, including Gia, looked on in disbelief, questioning her claim of being a pacifist. Gia, still processing Adu's earlier statements, asked if there was something she was worried about, while Adu prepared to move on. Ode no Adu sobered, revealing that among the information taken, there were a few unpleasant things that required an immediate report to the king. Ira Takuto pondered the existence of witches. Ira remarked to Ode no Adu that witches were something they had never encountered throughout Eternal Nations, highlighting that this world was, as expected, utterly different from the game. Ode no Adu further explained that information about other countries, the existence of saintesses learned from Molter, and lore of the world learned from Imle were all elements not present in the game, and they should be wary of differences in system implementation. Ira Takuto stated that according to the memories of the Holy Knights, the two good-aligned countries had not experienced large-scale conflict in recent decades. He added that they couldn't confirm the existence of this world's leading figures, and if any players were present, they were likely amateurs, given the current friendly relations between nations. He pointed out that Ode no Adu's memory dispossession ability was not implemented in the game, signifying that they could no longer trust the game's setup. Ira sighed, realizing he had been transported not into the game's world, but to an entirely different world despite the game's popularity. Ode no Adu brought up critical information concerning mayhem in Qualia's northern region. She detailed the power dynamics, a cardinal, the northern region clashing with a witch, an investigation team of Lornias and Vertil formed due to an oracle to the saintess, and a scheme to use the occasion to smear the southern branch by sending a useless individual. The central issue was identified as the instigator of the chaos, the weeping witch Iranoki. Ira confirmed the presence of witches. He acknowledged confirmation that these witches possessed prowess equivalent to a hero. Ira stated that at least the game's hero creation system was functioning, so they would proceed as scheduled, though the increased threats prompted him to consider one more thing. Ode no Adu inquired about his thoughts. Ira pondered whether he should attempt to forge an alliance between countries. A soldier asks Solina if the witch Irakino has made any recent movements. Solina explains that with her, the saint, present at the foremost fortress, the stalemate is expected to persist for some time. Despite the situation, Solina quietly hopes for someone's safety. The soldier details the extensive damage. 2 cities in the northern provinces were destroyed, and approximately 30,000 soldiers perished at the hands of the witch, with villages and small towns suffering the most. Solina looks up with sorrow, repeatedly apologizing for not being able to save someone. The soldier urges Solina to wait, explaining they need the cardinal's permission to deploy to the front lines. Solina replies that it will not be necessary, as he has already run far away and is long gone. The scene shifts to the Elnar Spiritual Alliance. The meeting takes place in the council chamber of Tetracia. Several elves are gathered around a central, ornate table. An elf reports that they have lost contact with Weisnar, the city representative of the Torwise clan, and is convinced he has turned against them. Another elf exclaims in disbelief, asking if this means the entire clan has turned against them. One of the elves, addressing his fellows blessed by the spirits, questions if they should ask the Holy Kingdom of Qualia for assistance. Another elf rebukes him, calling it a pathetic demand for their ally Qualia, and insists that the pride of the elven race demands they handle this on their own. He further argues that Qualia is already struggling with the Witch of the North, and it should be them offering help, not the other way around. The elf resolves to get this problem out of the way by bringing out the saints. A stern-faced elf listens silently. The scene transitions to the Dark Continent, described as a nation of spirits and beastmen, where a powerful energy attack is shown. Observing the aftermath, one beastman remarks to another that it is as expected, noting their companion can take down even such a vicious monster with ease. A beastman comments that while she looks like nothing but a hag, she is many times stronger than them. Another suggests they dispose of the orc corpse. Suddenly, one of them senses more enemies approaching. They are shocked by the sheer number of approaching foes. The beastmen decide to send a messenger and inform everyone about the approaching danger. The location is identified as the construction site of the Minagura Palace in the Dark Continent's Great Curse realm. Ode no Adu approaches and asks Imle how the construction of the palace is progressing. Imle, bowing respectfully, informs Adu-san that they are making good progress. Imle explains that while they were ordered to take care of their living quarters first, they all wanted to build a palace worthy of their king and are happy to finally get started. Iratakudo is seen relaxing and humming to himself. He is addressed as Takudo-sama. Ode no Adu approaches Iratakudo and politely asks if she may have a word with him. Iratakudo turns, asking what is wrong. Ode no Adu begins by asking Takudo-sama if it is true that he was just an ordinary civilian before he came here. Iratakudo seems slightly confused by the question. He confirms that it is normal, mentioning his parents might have had some money, while Ode no Adu clarifies that is not what she meant. Ode no Adu explains that since she and Takudo-sama have always been connected, she is concerned she may have hurt him when she killed those holy knights. She elaborates on her worries, the corpse smell, the look of despair, and bodily fluids, all of which a former normal human like Takudo might find deeply unsettling. Takudo smiles and asks why Adu thinks he would be uncomfortable. Ode no Adu is visibly surprised by his response. Takudo asks Adu what is troubling her, and she wonders what is wrong with him. Takudo explains that he has a lot on his mind. He continues, saying that when he is with Adu-san, he thinks he can handle it, and asks her to please take care of him, which makes her blush. With determined eyes, Ode no Adu responds affirmatively, stating, "Yes, as you command." She then addresses him as my king, her shadowy form revealing a sinister smile, identifying him as the evil god nation's king, Iratakudo. Ode no Adu joyfully exclaims that the palace is complete, while Iratakudo confirms its completion. The Minagra Palace Level 1 is revealed, a grand structure that produces resources every turn without maintenance costs. After defeating the investigation team, Minagra is steadily gaining the power it needs. Takudo reflects that mana production is going as expected, but he still needs to find the Dragon's Vein Cave, surprised to have a palace this early. He also mentions that military magic is in the testing stage and wonders if their country's foundation is somewhat set. Adu interjects, stating they are still in need of human resources and questions how they should attain them. Adu suddenly exclaims that she has realized something important, while Takudo looks on with confusion. She elaborates that concerning human resources, no one has been assigned as Takudo-sama's caretaker. Takudo suggests he can manage on his own, but Adu firmly states it's an issue of national principle. Adu passionately argues that Takuto, as the sole entity ensuring the country's development and people's faith, must be dignified. Adu further explains her concern, stating it is impractical for only two people to live in such a large palace, and wonders what would happen if he suddenly needed something. Internally, Takuto bemoans his communication disorder, wishing for personnel he could easily converse with, but ultimately yields to Adu's insistence. Takuto admits that although it's improving, he still struggles to talk with Gia and Molter as he does with Adu, sensing their fear of him. He expresses his desire to be a more approachable king. Adu, seizing the moment, declares she has an idea to help him achieve this and will handle it. Adu summons Gia and Molter, informing them of an urgent order. Adu enthusiastically announces that His Majesty's wish is to gather all the little girls. Gia, Molter, and a small elf girl are visibly shocked by this declaration. Takuto himself is taken aback and flustered by Adu's interpretation of his wish. A flustered Takuto calls out Adu's name in disbelief. Adu explains her reasoning. It might be easier for Takuto, despite his communication difficulties, to interact with young girls. Molter interprets this as the king's desire to personally nurture future retainers, while Gia humbly acknowledges the king's concern for their workload. Takuto internally notes that he somehow provided an excuse for Adu's plan, which is praised as expected of their king, especially for wishing young girls to succeed regardless of gender. Emle expresses her delight, noting that women in occupations like hers are rare, and she is glad their numbers will increase. Takuto announces that if it is settled, the candidate selection process will be held in the throne room at once, delegating the arrangements. He internally resolves to use this chance to overcome his communication disorder, believing he managed to trick them for the sake of future negotiations. Takuto is shown slumped in despair. Adu encourages her king to pull himself together. He laments that all the children cried instantly upon seeing him, despite him not even speaking to or looking at them during their interview. Takuto declares that all the children in the country are weak, while Gia remarks that given the king's appearance, it's understandable they would cry. Gia asks Elder Molter if he presented the twins to the king. Adu demands details from Molter. Molter explains that the twins are brilliant but might not be worthy, and significantly they have no remaining family. Molter remarks that Gia has already brought the twins, while Adu suggests that if they are clever it should be fine and she will decide. Gia instructs the two young elf girls to greet their king. The two young elf girls, one with long hair and the other with shorter, scabbed hair, walk forward hand in hand. The twins bow before Takuto and Adu, expressing that it is a pleasure to meet their great king. The girl with shorter, scabbed hair introduces herself as Carrie Urfel. The girl with long, flowing hair introduces herself as the big sister, Mary Urfel. Takuto stammers a greeting, pleased to meet them. Adu observes that not crying immediately upon seeing Takuto-sama means they have passed the first stage, though she seems to hesitate. Adu inquires about the scabs on Carrie, who explains they are due to disease. Carrie adds that for her this is what she deserved. Molter offers to elaborate on the matter to the king and Adu. He clarifies that the scabs are healed scars from a past disease. Molter suggests that if Carrie's appearance doesn't bother the king, it shouldn't be an issue, while Adu inquires about Mary, who seems like an ordinary child. Carrie mentions that her elder sister, Mary, has endured significant hardships. Mary calmly and shockingly declares that she ate her mother. Takuto and Adu react with stunned silence, Adu deeming it a regrettable decision. Molter explains that the twins' mother was a highly respectable person, and their tribe will never forget her devotion and self-sacrifice. Takuto understands that their reaction to the human flesh tree was due to these traumatic experiences. Molter continues, explaining they were driven from their homeland and endured a harsh journey. They faced numerous hardships and were forced to make extreme choices. Among these terrible choices was likely resorting to cannibalism to survive starvation. Adu reflects that their journey concluded in the great cursed land with no certainty of survival, and adds that Carrie's scabs look like intentional burns. She notes Carrie's fair complexion, suggesting no mistreatment, and that they did not attempt to hide their difficult past. Adu decides that, ultimately, their past is irrelevant. Adu is impressed that they have overcome their fear, considering Takuto's presence as a positive influence for them as potential ladies-in-waiting. Mary turns to Takuto asking what he thinks, surprising both him and Adu. Mary smiles and repeats her question with anticipation. Mary then directly asks Takuto if he will take care of her, to which he responds that there will be many things to remember and important tasks. Mary confidently declares that she will take care of the king. Takuto looks surprised, while Adu and other observers are shocked that he is holding a proper conversation with a little girl, considering her employed. Takuto then turns to Carrie, who stands before him with Molter nearby and asks for her response. Carrie states that she will also do her best, acknowledging her responsibility as the younger sister. Takuto officially declares that Mary and Carrie will be retainer candidates for Minagra, despite his internal reservations about the situation being deplorable. Gia observes from a distance, confirming that the king has approved their appointment. Gia further states that from this day forward they will serve as caretakers to the king, and he hopes he can get along with both of them. A mishap occurs where liquid is spilled on Takuto, with Mary exclaiming it's spilled and Takuto trying to reassure them it is fine. Carrie earnestly offers to wipe Takuto's clothes dry and he thanks her for the gesture. Takuto internally reflects on how often his clothes have been wet lately, understanding that as children, their work will be sloppy and he cannot be angry with them for their mistakes. Takuto internally notes that after their work is done, the girls usually go outside to play. Mary stands before Takuto, holding a bowl, looking contemplative. Mary then asks Takuto if he is a bad person, a question he finds rare, especially since he had not gotten angry about the earlier mishaps. Takuto explains to Mary that his affinity is indeed evil. Mary, looking serious, presses further, asking why he didn't kill them if he is truly evil. Takuto is comically flustered by Mary's direct line of questioning. Mary pouts, and a sweating Takuto reassures her that he wouldn't kill his caretakers. Carrie observes the interaction, noting that her sister is confronting the supposedly evil king, who is instead showing them kindness and mercy. Takuto internally rationalizes that their mistakes are minor and certainly not grounds for killing his vassals. Carrie quietly states that her suffering is deserved, which is juxtaposed with Molter's earlier words about their mother's respectability and Mary's shocking confession. Takuto thoughtfully says he understands, processing their heavy confessions. He then turns to Mary and Carrie, asking if every mistake they have made up to this point was intentional. The sisters are visibly startled by his unexpected question. Mary responds that they both deserve to die and Carrie concurs, including herself and her big sister. Mary and Carrie stand resigned, reflecting on how their mother's sacrifice and the life they accepted from her became a memory of their burden and sin. They collectively plead with Takuto to punish them for their past actions. Takuto, understanding their motive, asks if they thought they might finally die if they angered him. He then smiles and clarifies that he has no intention of killing them. Surprised, Mary asks Takuto why he will not kill them, especially given his nature, but he replies simply that he does not want to. Takuto offers an example, suggesting that a good person might hurt or steal, but they could not bring themselves to murder. Mary then presses, asking what exactly a bad person is, to which Takuto indicates it is not just the opposite of his previous example. Takuto explains his philosophy. A bad person is someone who does what they desire, a person who is truly free. Takuto further defines an evil person as one who is free to do good or bad, capable of anything, selfish, and acts according to their own perceived right. He then connects this to their actions, stating that is why their mistakes are also truly deplorable. Mary and Carrie listen intently to his words. Takuto then gently asks Mary what her mother's exact words were to them. Tears are visible in Carrie's eyes as she recalls her mother's last words. A flashback shows their mother embracing Mary and Carrie, urging them to live on. Takuto encourages Mary, telling her to be proud because both she and her mother did the right thing, and her mother's love ultimately prevailed against fate. Takuto blesses the tearful Mary and Carrie for their endeavors, declaring them free as his citizens. Adu watches this resolution with a thoughtful expression. Sometime later, Takuto is pleased as he sits on his throne with Mary and Carrie, who are now welcomed, thinking that the three of them are finally getting along well. Adu questions Takuto about his interaction with the girls, asking if he actually laid his hands on them, to which a flustered Takuto denies and demands her report. Adu offers a quick apology and shifts to presenting an intelligence report concerning the nearest town and the possibility of forming an alliance. Adu explains the report, detailing information about the Dark Continent, the city of Dragonton within the Great Cursed Land, the neutral country Forgon, and its administration by staff holders. Takuto considers that Forgon, as a multiracial country with diverse cultures and ideologies, offers hope for diplomacy. He then questions the decision to build the city of Dragonton in such a remote location, noting the disadvantages for defense and logistics. Adu begins to explain that the reason is likely due to the Dragonton land itself, prompting Takuto's interest. Adu reveals the crucial information. The land of Dragonton produces mana and contains the resource map for the Dragon Veins Cave. Forgon is described as a significant multiracial nation in the Dark Continent, where people worship spirits found in animals, plants, and the earth. Despite its multiracial composition, the citizens of Forgon live without internal friction, and the ongoing wars seem distant to those in its pastoral regions. The people of Forgon are shown to be in unavoidable conflict, with demi-human races referred to as barbarians. A soldier shouts in alarm, identifying a hill giant and urging someone to inform the staff-bearer elders. The same soldier, distressed, confirms that another hill giant has indeed appeared. Soldiers lament that fighting hill giants is far worse than dealing with orcs and goblins, puzzled by its repeated attacks outside its usual territory. A defender cries out in alarm as the hill giant targets an unrepaired section of the city's earthen wall. The dire consequences are clear. If the hill giant breaches the city, it will be their end. The hill giant continues its relentless assault on the defenders. One soldier expresses the sentiment that facing a hill giant is too much for their exhausted forces, while another acknowledges the seemingly impossible odds. A worried commander urgently calls for the staff-bearer, fearing that the city and perhaps the entire country will fall if the situation persists. A spearhead appears as someone exclaims that grass vine magic is being used. Vines shoot up from the earth, targeting the giant. The powerful magic successfully trips the hill giant, sending it crashing to the ground. A soldier witnesses this, wondering aloud if this is the work of the cane holder's magic. Pepe, standing on the subdued giant, reassures the Forgon soldiers that she, a staff-bearer, has arrived. Pepe confidently presents herself as the staff-bearer who has come to their aid. Looking at her accomplishment, Pepe exclaims that her display of power is truly incredible. Pepe smiles, satisfied with her performance, as the elders cheer her on. The soldiers enthusiastically cheer for Pepe, urging her to hear their praise louder. As the hill giant roars in defiance, Pepe unleashes another powerful spell. Her attack is revealed to be quagmire magic, trapping the giant. Pepe casts grass vine magic once more to further restrain the giant. The giant is completely ensnared by the vines and the quagmire. A beastfolk archer celebrates the opening and is instructed to aim for the giant's eyes. The archer's arrow finds its mark, striking the giant in the eye. The beastfolk archer offers sincere thanks for the help received in defeating the giant. Lady Tanukapali, a commanding bull-like figure, is acknowledged by the soldiers. Two elderly individuals acknowledge the good work done, remarking on their age and wishing they were younger to contribute more. Pepe cheerfully teases Lady Tanukapali, suggesting elders do not last long and offering a shoulder massage. The elders critique Pepe's words and massage as subpar, with one wondering about her progress in her lessons. An elder explains that a staff-bearer is one who can hear the voice of nature spirits, and Pepe is a long-awaited candidate for this role. Lady Tanukapali expresses her disappointment, having hoped for a prodigy but finding Pepe to be remarkably foolish. An elder proudly declares he's still in his prime at 240, while Pepe jests about their long lives, much to Tanukapali's exasperation about the country's prospects. Pepe recalls being told to aim for giants' weak points due to their strength, but sheepishly admits she forgot what she did during the battle. Tanukapali concedes that Pepe possesses talent but can be an airhead, then steers the conversation to the main topic. An elder informs Pepe and Tanukapali that they will both be sent to Dragonton. Tanukapali reflects that it is finally time for serious work, noting Dragonton's numerous requests for aid and their potential feeling of abandonment. An elder explains that their previous measures were minimal because the barbarian attacks weren't critical, though he also worried about Dragonton's lack of defensive measures. Tanukapali dismisses the people of the frontier town as greedy for attempting to settle within the Dragon's Vein cave, while the elder prepares to ask something important. The elder reveals that divination magic has foreseen a calamity in the Great Cursed Land, which he suspects is the cause of the recent attacks. The elder suggests that the root of their troubles might be in the Great Cursed Land, and if Pepe and Tanukapali can address it, all their problems could be solved at once. Tanukapali understands the mission is not a mere desperate attempt, but a journey into the ominous Great Cursed Land. Tanukapali considers the dire risks, sending their two most capable individuals to the unknown terrain of the Great Cursed Land, where calamity looms could lead to their demise and leave their country defenseless, with only an old staff-bearer remaining at Crescent Moon. Pepe, overhearing the discussion, acknowledges that this mission is indeed a huge gamble. An elder expresses regret for assigning a difficult task to Lady Tanukapali. Lady Tanukapali states she will prepare immediately, confident that with two of them going, they won't be easily defeated. Pepe cheerfully wishes them a safe journey, and it is noted that she will be accompanying them. The importance of the Dragon Veins Cave is highlighted, as it is the very existence of Earth's mana. It is presumed that once the country's research on tactical magic is finished, they would be able to refine the powerful Earth's mana to strengthen the country internally. They cannot abandon Dragonton nor the Dragon's Vein cave it houses, and must seek a way to survive the predicament. A week later, the chosen few arrived at the city, though one person expresses surprise they are not reinforcements. They paved their way to the great cursed lands. Lady Tanukapali reflects that only now does she realize her previous judgment was an understatement. A group led by Ode no Adu approaches, and the narrator reflects that only now would they realize their previous judgment was an understatement. Ode no Adu looks surprised and questions who these people are. One of Tanukapali's companions observes that Ode no Adu's group are not human. Ode no Adu offers a slight smile. A member of Tanukapali's party wonders about the nature of the dark elves. From just a glance, it's clear Adu's group is surrounded by a thick, ominous aura. A beastman nervously asks Lady Tanukapali about these beings, and she sternly orders her companions not to draw their weapons. The beastmen in Tanukapali's group feel their instincts reacting to the dark aura, acknowledging the bad situation due to bringing a beastman-only group. They consider turning back but worry that showing hostility will provoke an attack, knowing they cannot win. Ode no Adu contemplates the situation. Ode no Adu commands Jia to order everyone to stand by, and Jia acknowledges. A beastman elder wonders if Adu's group has no intention to fight them. Ode no Adu is recognized by the beastman elder as being a cut above the rest. The beastman elder considers what to do before his soldiers act recklessly. Pepe raises her hand, asking for their attention for a while. Pepe steps forward towards Ode no Adu and her companions. Pepe cheerfully introduces herself and asks for the name of the person she is addressing, while someone exclaims her name in surprise. Pepe then proudly recounts telling the wretched beings that brought devastation upon Forgon to have a fill of her magic. Pepe asks Ode no Adu if she heard what she just said, and Adu confirms she did. Ode no Adu asks Lady Tanukapali why this child Pepe is so attached to her, and Tanukapali apologizes, calling Pepe an idiot. Ode no Adu states that their aspiration to have an audience with the king has helped to elude any unnecessary conflict between them. Lady Tanukapali explains that for every living being, there's a natural instinct for survival etched into their souls, which awakens to avoid danger and asks for forgiveness for her soldiers' rudeness. Lady Tanukapali groans, noting the miasma inside the forest is too dense, but thinks Pepe being a thick-headed idiot should be fine. Ode no Adu reflects that this bona fide monster of a little girl, Pepe, said something about the king they worship and serve under, wondering what lies waiting for them. Pepe and Lady Tanukapali look towards the source of the ominous presence. A shadowy figure, Iratakudo, is revealed seated on a throne, emanating a powerful aura. One of Tanukapali's beastmen companions remarks that it is no wonder their neighbors are such an ominous bunch. The being on the throne is identified as an evil god. Lady Tanukapali's group formally greets the great king, stating it is a pleasure to be in his presence and that they hail from Forgon. Pepe excitedly introduces herself, asking to become friends no matter what. Lady Tanukapali tries to restrain Pepe, exclaiming her name in frustration. Lady Tanukapali apologizes, explaining that Pepe is very nervous. Iratakudo agrees that they can be friends and get along from now on, much to the shock of a nearby beastman. Ode no Adu enthusiastically congratulates Takudo-sama on making his first friend and calls for applause. The assembled group begins to clap, offering words of encouragement. Lady Tanukapali is utterly dumbfounded, remarking that the situation has turned into something outrageous. Pepe, the self-proclaimed leader, enthusiastically introduced herself, expressing her hope for friendship. Iratakudo, initially taken aback, realized with surprise that this cheerful child was indeed their leader, having previously assumed it was the formidable Lady Tanukapali, but he reciprocated the friendly sentiment. During the preceding feast, even the usually stoic Urfalcaria seemed a bit overwhelmed by the abundance of food. Pepe and Takudo had shared a moment during the lively gathering. The banquet had been a vibrant affair filled with diverse attendees. As the Forgon delegation departed, Takudo and Adu bid them farewell. Adu, addressing her hero unit, praised their performance, stating that it was thanks to everyone that they were able to establish friendly relations with the Forgon. Adu declared it a joyous occasion for their peace-loving country, Minagra. Dark Elf Tribe Chief Molter, Warrior Captain Jia, and Private Secretary Imle were key figures in this success. The ladies-in-waiting, Mary and Carrie, along with Imle, were also part of the celebration. King Iratakudo offered his congratulations to the group. Adu recounted to Takudo how she was constantly on edge when they first went to Dragonton and met with the Forgon leaders, especially since it followed their fight with the Holy Knights. Adu observed that, at the moment, the holy country Qualia did not appear to be making any moves against them, likely due to their attention being diverted to problems in their northern regions. Considering this a blessing, Adu proposed they use this moment to focus on expanding their nation's power. Adu announced that the Great Ceremony Perfect Negotiation had been activated, ensuring the relationship between Minagra and Forgon would remain friendly, and requested they review the details agreed upon. She outlined the terms. Minagra would provide food and Forgon would offer metal equipment, daily necessities, support against barbarians, and joint management of the Dragon's Vein Cave, the rights to which were the most beneficial gain for Minagra. Emle happily reported that the Forgon enjoyed their food immensely, even coining the term food that corrupts, to which Lady Tanukapali humbly acknowledged the honor. Jia presented his findings, confirming Dragonton was attacked, but the barbarians' origins were still a mystery. Adu, recognizing they were still in the dark, instructed Jia to continue the investigation. Adu considered her current status, realizing that defeating a wide variety of units would significantly boost her power, potentially allowing them to eliminate the barbarians in one swift move if timed correctly. Imle announced the next item on the agenda concerned their established diplomatic relationships, particularly mutual trade and defense pact agreements. She formally asked if anyone had anything to say or any questions regarding these agreements. Adu listened intently. Molter also gave his attention to Imle's question. Jia remained silent, considering the query. The room fell silent as the group mulled over Imle's question. Imle prompted for input, asking what the question was. Mary and Carrie admitted they had no idea what kind of country Forgon truly was. The group collectively realized their shared lack of detailed knowledge about Forgon. Molter agreed, explaining that although they had gathered some information for the king, they lacked sufficient details about Forgon's national affairs for an in-depth discussion. Takuto lamented that their only information about Forgon was superficial, and understanding details like beliefs, values, and disparities was crucial for diplomacy, especially with the Great Cursed Land so close to Dragonton, which they could barely protect. He realized that since everything was handled by the game system, requirements not displayed in their status were a blind spot. Adu explained that investigating Forgon was necessary, but even if they decided to act, sending envoys to the distant Dragonton would take too long, outlining a process from investigation at Crescent Moon to dispatching from Minagra. Adu suggested prioritizing information gathering in Dragonton, while Imle worried that even if they wanted to trade, the current situation made it difficult. Jia questioned why they couldn't send the envoys they were originally planning for Dragonton ahead of schedule to continue their investigation. Imle raised her hand, expressing some concerns regarding Jia's suggestion. She reminded them that during the banquet, the Forgon mentioned the frequency of barbarian attacks was beyond normal. Imle continued, explaining that the sudden outbreak meant they didn't know when the barbarians might target Minagra, questioning if sending Adu, their hero, as an envoy was a wise decision. She emphasized that if Adu were away, they would lack the power to protect His Majesty if an emergency arose. The council members considered Imle's points. Takuto reflected on the unforeseen necessity of clearing such conditions for dispatching personnel. He acknowledged that for official diplomatic missions, one must select envoys very carefully. Irakino suddenly appeared, enthusiastically declaring her intention to come over and play. Irakino's unexpected arrival surprised the group. Carrie hesitantly reminded Takuto that Pepe-sama had indicated it was fine for them to come over and play. Takuto processed the idea of them coming to play. Pepe, while eating, affirmed that not just Takuto-kun but everyone was welcome. Takuto was clearly surprised by this development. Takuto had a realization, exclaiming that if it was for recreational purposes, it would be fine. He then asked Imle if it was possible to send people for greetings before sending formal envoys. Imle affirmed this, stating they could go under the pretext of dropping by to pay respect to the city elders, who would likely be thrilled by the visit. Takuto concluded that the only thing left was to choose who they were sending, adding that as long as it was a Minagra citizen, he could use shared vision with them. Mary and Carrie immediately volunteered, both enthusiastically stating they would do their best. Takuto reacted with shock, exclaiming that sending them would be dangerous. Imle voiced her strong objection to sending Mary and Carrie on such a dangerous mission, suggesting that perhaps Molter could go if it were merely a greeting. Takuto immediately expressed his disapproval. He stated that Molter was not a suitable choice. Jia acknowledged the complexity of the situation. Molter elaborated that for their own people he was just a wise elder, but his official capacity in other countries was comparable to a prime minister and minister of magic, meaning his visit for a mere greeting could cause a significant stir. Moulter stated that their own positions were too high-ranking for such a casual greeting, with Jia adding that Imle was Minister of Domestic Affairs and he was a general. Moulter emphasized that while one's attitude is important, they couldn't simply send a civilian, implying that the envoys still needed some standing, even if not overly crucial. Takuto, ever cautious, voiced his concern about the potential danger involved in sending Mary and Carrie, while Adu's faction seemed to believe they were the ideal candidates for the trip. Adu, representing the king's safety faction, declared she would be the one to go, expressing that the king was very worried and questioning why no one understood his fears that Mary and Carrie could be kidnapped or worse. Moulter reiterated that they couldn't send someone in the position of the king's confidant, which was Lady Adu, to which Adu reacted with confusion. Carrie, seemingly misunderstanding or being playful, declared that they had no choice as she was the king's confidant, while Mary mentioned something His Majesty had said to them previously. Takuto considered their words, thinking about how they both sought freedom. Mary and Carrie explained to Takuto that being useful to him was a form of freedom they desired, and they were prepared even knowing the risks. Takuto looked hesitant and troubled by their request. With earnest expressions, Mary and Carrie implored their Majesty to allow them to undertake the mission. With a sigh of resignation, Takuto agreed to let them go, leading Mary and Carrie to celebrate their success, while Adu watched in stunned silence. Adu was aghast, thinking that her king was yielding to girls other than herself. Takuto casually dismissed Adu's concerns about the two girls, while Imle pragmatically asked about arranging escorts for them. Moulter informed His Majesty Takuto that he had a suggestion regarding the escorts. Takuto inquired what Elder Moulter had in mind, who replied he just wanted to reconfirm something. Moulter brought up the subject of Lady Pepe. He voiced his doubts about Forgon, citing Pepe's questionable demeanor and lack of a coherent plan, wondering if they were truly worthy allies, especially considering the potential instability of their nation and the need to investigate the Great Cursed Land. Takuto recalled how Pepe's eccentric behavior had certainly stood out and caused concern. He pondered whether everything Pepe had said truly came from her genuine feelings. Despite having some reservations, Takuto ultimately decided to trust the arrangement. Moulter bowed in acceptance, stating he would abide by His Majesty's wishes. Mary and Carrie looked on in awe at the structure before them. They stood before the impressive medical treatment facility, a building that boosted recovery for units within it, removed disease demerits, and unlocked the medic unit. Takuto explained that he had wanted to build it due to its cost-effectiveness, comparable to the human flesh tree, with Imle having handled the specifics, while Mary recognized it as a place to cure illnesses. Takuto attempted to shift the discussion to the topic of magic research facilities. However, Adu turned away with a disgruntled HMPH. Takuto noted that Adu had been in a bad mood since their previous meeting, just as Mary leaned in to whisper something to him. Mary discreetly suggested to Takuto a way he could express his gratitude to Adu. Following Mary's advice, Takuto whispered into Adu's ear. Adu reacted with an intense blush, much to Mary's amusement. Inside a designated building, Mary and Carrie cautiously looked around, questioning if their escort was truly present. A menacing figure wearing a plague doctor's mask loomed before Carrie, causing her to tense up. Mary and Carrie reacted with surprise to the sudden appearance and declaration. The imposing figures in plague doctor attire enthusiastically hailed Ira Takuto as their great king. The medic unit bowed deeply, declaring their readiness to follow any orders given. Takuto, standing with Adu, confirmed that these were indeed a medic unit, remarking that their availability was perfect as he had thought he would need them. Adu remarked that since the Dark Elves became Minagra citizens, eating food provided by Takuto had generally improved their constitution, though she also noted that these particular units he created were usually idle. Takuto added that their special abilities were also a valuable asset, a sentiment with which Adu agreed, praising her king's foresight. Adu then prepared to convey the king's instructions to the medic unit. She ordered them to escort Mary and Carrie to Dragonton and to meticulously observe the local culture and current events there. The three medics eagerly acknowledged their tasks, focusing on culture, observation, and escort duties. The medic unit collectively exclaimed that this mission was an example of truly humane behavior, as Takuto announced a reward from the king. Takuto, addressing the medics who would be escorting Mary and Carrie, bestowed upon them the human names Ikaru, Jiru, and Saburu. The three medics stood in formation, ready for their assignment. Takuto reflected on the fact that he had given them human names. Ikaru declared their intent to complete the mission flawlessly, with Jiru and Saburu echoing his commitment, while Mary enthusiastically included herself. Takuto laughed, remarking that he had tried to think of names without game references but as expected had defaulted to them, while Carrie observed their current state. Carrie hesitated, wondering what was left to address. As Mary called out to them, the medics turned their attention, asking what their lady required. Carrie nervously questioned the medics, asking if they would absolutely listen to what she and Mary said. The medics boisterously confirmed that they would, of course, obey their lady, with Mary looking pleased. Takuto leaned in to ask Carrie for her thoughts on the situation. Carrie, initially overwhelmed and deeming it impossible, quickly gathered her resolve, stating she would try her best, while Takuto looked on anxiously. While Mary reveled in the medic's enthusiastic chanting about humans, Adu offered words of support to Carrie, telling her she could confide in her if any problems arose during their very uncertain adventure. A shadowy